Live in Banjul, broadcasting for viewers in the Gambia and around the world. This is GRTS News at 2200 hours, and in the headlines this evening. His Excellency President Adama Barrow pledges to electrify the entire Gambia in 2023 as he tours communities in his Meet the People tour. The Minister of Foreign Affairs receives a delegation from the African Union in the Gambia to review the country's economy and political process. Gambia makes global headlines after a new research by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says the West African nation is the only country on track to meet the target of the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. And sports. To support healthcare delivery, the Gambia Armed Forces and Bansang Hospital stage a major regional football event to encourage blood donation. Away from home, a newly discovered Van Gogh drawing hidden in a private collection for more than a century goes on display for the first time at an Amsterdam museum. Plus, leaders of the Economic Community of West Africa imposed stiffer sanctions on the military junta that ousted Guinea's President Alpha Condé. That's the top of the news and much more coming ahead in the next half an hour. My name is Bai Ibrahim Cham. Many thanks for joining us. It's great to have you here. We begin this bulletin with the presidency. His Excellency Adama Barrow, who has promised to electrify the entire Gambia by 2023 without distance and terrain as barriers. The Gambian leader and head of the National People's Party was addressing people of the Upper River region during his Meet the People tour. Now, meeting communities in Basse, the president also donated a community ambulance for speedy healthcare delivery. Details in this report by Louis Mendy.
The Upper River region in frenzy as President Barrow returned to his native home to gather first-hand information as to whether his government policies and programs are transforming the lives of the people, hence Meet the People tour. And yes was the answer told by the reception accorded to him and his cabinet ministers from Lunghari to the Basse Mini Stadium, full to the capacity for the first time in a presidential visit. The banners float in the sky, the loud voices, the instrument and masquerades gracing the occasion, all indication of the appreciation of the development President Barrow brought to the region in just under 5 years. Major among them is the Basse Market, the Woolley, Kantora, and the Tumana roads and bridges connecting the three districts to the town of Basse. A handshake with community leaders, historic and significant. The Basse rally was a short one, interrupted by the foaming rain which never came, but nonetheless the large turnout and the speech of Alcalo Seluba was enough to convince President Barrow that the Upper River region is no opposed for him and his National People's Party in the upcoming December election. Alcalo Seluba said President Barrow consoled the people of Basse and beyond by building a new state-of-the-art market when the old one was consumed by fire, and they will reciprocate that by voting for him and his party in December. Addressing the meeting, President Barrow promised that the Upper River region will see more development in the coming years, some of which will come through the program for accelerated community development. The initiative of the Office of the President is giving out tractors, power tillers, milling machines, boreholes and electricity to communities across the country. The rally also witnessed the delivery of a community ambulance to the region for speedy healthcare delivery. Earlier, President Barrow visited the 50-hectare pump irrigation rice field in Sotumasamba in the Upper River region. The Agriculture Value Chain Development Project offers a fighting chance against poverty and a catalyst for food security. Dr. Farmer Bulisanyang is the project manager.
It's one of 5 sites, but the whole thing is to have rice production twice a year, dry season, rainy season. So the whole thing will be tested during the dry season for dry season production. Yeah, everything here is mechanized, from pumping the water from the river into the canals, which are all concrete lines. This concrete lines as a group, because this is for the whole of Sotuma and surrounding villages. And it will be divided into different plots.
President Barrow is pleased that the project is in line with the National Development Plan.
This is Sotuma, is within Jimara.
Yeah.
This is where I came from. Yeah, so if such a project is in Jimara, I think I will also be part of that project. Not as president, but as citizen of this area. But definitely I think it is in line with the NDP. You know, when I spoke to one time President Buhari, he said when he came, you know, they invested into rice production. Now they are importing 10% only. You know, Gambia, we are importing about 80-something percent. It's very, very high. How much are we producing? We are producing just 13%. 13%. That is very, very small.
The president also warned the agriculturists to work with farmers to ensure its sustainability.
And also lift people from poverty. And also it reduce the importation of rice. And also we consume quality rice. You know, because the rice is produced here, we know. When you order the rice from Brazil, it might be 1 year or 2 years old. But here, we are sure that it is fresh.
The Gambia still imports over 80% of the rice it consumes, and Gambians should serve as activists in changing the scenario, as the cereal remains the country's staple food, said President Barrow. Louis Mendy, GRTS.
A delegation from the African Union Office on Governance and Conflict Prevention is in the Gambia to review its economy and current political process. On Friday, the EAU delegates paid a courtesy call on the Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and Gambians Abroad. The delegation is headed by the Director of Governance and Conflict Prevention, Mbari Caliste Aristide. The officials, who are on a 5-day visit, will also meet other stakeholders to discuss the way forward for the Gambia to increase tolerance and peace in its transition to a stable social, economic and political dispensation. Let's take a listen in this excerpt.
The area of support are many. I can quote quickly the constitutionalism and the rule of law, elections, mediation, security sector reform, transitional justice, human rights, just to quote a few of them. But we are here to see where it is possible to support the effort of the Gambian authorities so that they can fulfill their mandate and also towards a peaceful and credible election. So that's mainly the objective of the mission. We are here.
Well, that was Mbari Caliste Aristide, the Director of African Union on Governance and Conflict Prevention, there speaking on the purpose of their mission in Banjul. Preparations for the Global Climate Summit COP26 to be held in Glasgow, Scotland this November are in high gear as decision makers, civil society, activists and climate reporters set out to attend the world's biggest climate conference. Now, ahead of the crucial summit, the British High Commission in Banjul has been working with local journalists to harness their climate reporting skills. Fatou Ilika Mulushi led a session while joining fellow journalists and filed in this report.
Environmental and climate change reporting is increasingly dominating global news coverage as nations continue to experience the devastating effects of erratic rain patterns, natural disasters, and rising sea levels amid growing temperatures. The adverse impacts of changing weather conditions has made it necessary to build the capacities of climate reporters as windows to the world's climate challenges and take stock of commitments made in previous conferences ahead of the Global Climate Summit in Glasgow this year.
Climate information available and in turn that newsrooms give sufficient priority to climate and environment stories. We are in an election year here in the Gambia. The media should be questioning candidates about their plans for climate resilience should they win.
The British High Commission has been taking strides to support the Gambia government's climate change endeavours via the country's ambitious NDC target, whose implementation essentially requires journalists to crucially keep policymakers on track to fulfilling their commitments.
Government is only delighted to strengthen this partnership and to be part of this process. I want to declare to you today that all the journalists here or outside, if you want any copy of these documents that I'm mentioning, please feel free to contact us at the ministry and it will be provided.
Trainers here include the UK's climate experts and local journalists working towards improving climate reporting. The two-day session climaxed with the screening of videos produced by the British High Commission and activists working in environmental preservation.
This is something that is achievable. It just requires ambition and it requires, effort and understanding that our very own survival as humanity is at risk.
The climate drive covers a broad range of biodiversity from ocean cleaning, mangrove development, sustainable energy production and forest cover protection, which fuse a largely interlinked bionetwork. Broadening media understanding of these ecological units to the protection of planet Earth is crucial in demystifying the message to local audiences. Listening keenly to contributions from journalists and activists during the two-day session, the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Environment stressed the need for journalists to continue keeping policymakers accountable.
I implore again on all of us, especially you, the journalists who do the publicity and dissemination of information, to try to encourage society in general to be responsible and to be law-abiding as far as keeping the environment clean is concerned, and doing activities that are supposed to mitigate and help us adapt to climate change.
The Conference of Parties is just a month away, and climate reporters are building up their arsenal to challenge the world's biggest influencers on the strides taken so far to reduce greenhouse emissions and save the planet. Reporting for GRTS News, Fatu Elika Maloshi.
And now to a major development for the Gambia, which is making rounds on headlines around the world. After a new published research about the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change revealed that the West African nation is the only country currently doing enough to meet the Paris Agreement and world's aspiration of limiting global heating to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. The report, which comes ahead of COP26, is set to be hosted in Glasgow, Scotland, says nations are making sobering progress to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, but significant challenges remain in achieving the designated targets aimed at reducing global warming. Baba Silla takes a closer look of this achievement.
New research released ahead of the COP26 Global Climate Summit due to take place in November in Glasgow, Scotland, revealed the state of progress made in reducing global emissions and effort to meet the Paris Climate Agreement. The report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change hails the Gambia as a leader in fulfilling the targets of the Paris Climate Agreement, which seeks to limit global heating to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. 196 parties signed the Climate Pact in 2015 with major commitment to significantly reducing greenhouse emissions and pushing back global warming. While sobering progress is being made by nations, according to the IPCC research, considerable challenges still impede the reaching of global targets to alleviate environmental pollution by mitigating emission levels.
Countries representing 70% of the world economy and 65% of global carbon dioxide emissions have now committed to net zero. 2 weeks ago, I met with the chief executive officers of the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance, a coalition that represents over $5 trillion US. And they have committed to double the size of this group by COP26. This is a meaningful momentum, but of course, it's not enough.
The report highlights the Gambia as the only country currently doing enough to fulfill the world's aspiration of limiting global heating, with other developed countries like the UK and Germany also making considerable headways. The Paris Agreement is a legally binding deal and the single biggest attempt to revise current climate challenges.
the world remains way off target in staying with the 1.5-degree limit of the Paris Agreement. And this is why we need more ambition on mitigation, ambition on adaptation, and ambition on finance. The global coalition for net zero emissions needs to grow to cover more than 90% of the emissions. And this is a central objective for the United Nations this year. The drive to net zero must become the new normal for everyone, everywhere, for every country, every company, city, financial institution, as well as the key sectors such as aviation, shipping, industry, and agriculture.
The agreement incorporates a collaborative effort between developed and developing nations to improve climate adaptation and mitigation measures toward the attainment of a zero-emission world. Effort to reach the ambitious target currently harness the biggest ever multilateral endeavor among nations, but the realization of climate goals will demand even more attention and renewed commitment, which will be the key focus of the Glasgow Climate Summit in November. Baba Silla for GRTS News.
Now, earlier on, we spoke with Gambian climate expert Pausman Jajo on the significance of the IPCC report. Let's take a listen.
Is developing a net zero 2050 climate vision that is going to establish the country's goal towards a net zero carbon emission by the middle of the century. This would enable the country to move towards a low carbon climate resilient development trajectory by 2050. The Gambia has been identified as the front runners of the LDC initiative for effective adaptation and resilience called Life AR. And as part of this initiative, support is being provided to develop this 2050 vision. In terms of support from partners, there are various projects that have been supported by various multilateral and bilateral donors. UNDP, IFAD, the World Bank, the European Investment Bank, the Green Climate Fund, the Islamic Development Bank, the African Development Bank are supporting climate change initiatives and strategies, particularly in agriculture, energy, environment and natural resources, water, and the country is also investing resources into climate vulnerable sectors. One major investment is the OMVG energy project, through which government contributes immensely towards the operational budget of the OMVG, and also committing to the loans that were provided by development partners. The OMVG rural electrification project would enhance climate resilience through access to energy and also reduce losses and emissions through the electric grid. Currently, the country
Gambian climate expert and director of Green Climate Fund, Pausman Jajo, speaking there. Moving on, the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, PURA, has updated the press on details of the notice of suspension issued to GSM provider Comium. News of Comium's suspension trended widely across social media on Thursday. As I say to Katie reports, Comium has been given 2 weeks to respond pending the final determination of any action.
Providers operating in the country, amongst them energy services, communications, water and sewage facilities, and transport providers. GSM operator Comium is part of several mobile companies being regulated in the mobile communications sector, is on the spotlight following a release in circulation indicating a notice of the operator's suspension by PURA, which says it's acting in accordance with its Authorities Act.
In accordance with our regulations, we are to advise any service provider who is defaulting that we intend to cut your services, suspend your operations if you do not make good on what is required in accordance with our rules and regulations. And this is why the provider has been given 2 weeks to regularize and correct the anomalies so that we can restore the relations and not move to the second level, which will involve invoking suspensions.
The notice of suspension comes after several engagements with the service provider as a result of the non-payment of its license, spectrum fees, and international gateway levies for the period of 2020-2021.
Which is a regulatory requirement for any ISP provider. And secondly, in accordance with our rules, all service providers are supposed to give information to PURA on their activities and especially on their plans of investment. These are critical sectors in the economy. They involve a lot of people, consumers alike, but also employees. And they pay a lot of taxes to the government. So it is important that we ensure that they are supported. We've been having good relations with all the ISP providers, especially the big four. And Comium has contributed a lot to the economy and to the well-being of this country. Therefore, this is not something we took lightly or took in a haste. We tried all other options for a long time, for many times, allowing and giving extension upon extension upon extension until we exhausted all the limits that we can to say we need to do something to ensure that this is taken seriously and action is done so that we minimize the damage.
The amount in question is a total of $69.1 million. This press briefing by PURA seeks to update journalists on the details of the notice of suspension, which gives Comium a 2-week duration to settle its dues.
This was just served on them yesterday, so they have 15 days to make that representation. When we hear that representation, the authority is also obligated by our law to take consideration of the representation, the reasons that they make as to why they are unable to pay these liabilities that they owe government and also their non-compliance.
This might look like a Herculean challenge for the service provider amid the fiscal challenges brought by the pandemic. The Public Utilities and Regulatory Authority is now advising Comium subscribers to look for alternatives pending the final determination of the matter.
We are not advocating that people should leave Comium and go elsewhere. What we are saying is that there is a situation in the unfolding currently. So as is normal with Gambia, most people have more than one line. But if you don't have another line and we have this issue coming up with Comium which is not yet resolved, and there are chances that could cause you to not have communication means, we are telling you to prepare, at least to prepare yourself.
Whether or not Comium would be definitely suspended and its operations halted can only be determined with time, as the company has until the 1st of October to come up with tangible defense. For GRTS News, I am Aissatou Keita.
For more on that, GRTS spoke with Emma Mendy, the PURA's Director of Legal Licensing and Enforcement. Let's take a listen. Apologize for that technical hitch, but moving on, the National Association of Artisanal Fisheries Operators NAFO began a two-day training on small pelagic fish resources in Kanifing on Friday. The training, funded by the Confederation of African Artisanal Fisheries Professional Organization CAUPA, based in Senegal, brought together about 40 participants from Senegal and the Gambia to discuss and share knowledge on effective management and conservation measures of the fisheries resources in the region. Usman Mane has details of that report.
The objective of the two-day training for artisanal fisheries actors is to strengthen knowledge on the management and conservation of fisheries resources in the region. The capacity building initiative will focus on small pelagic fish resources, attracting about 40 participants from Senegal and the Gambia, organized by the National Association of Artisanal Fisheries Operators NAFO, funded by the Confederation of African Artisanal Fisheries Professional Organization.
The goal of CAUPA is to support fishers' development objectives, including improved poverty reduction, food security, employment generation, etc. These socioeconomic benefits can only be achieved and sustained by promoting effective management of rich fisheries and protecting associated marine biodiversity.
The president of NAFO, Fatou Per Choi, thanked CAUPA for the support while highlighting concerted efforts by stakeholders in the management and conservation of fisheries resources in the Gambia.
Among the strategy employed are capacity building awareness, creation on fisheries legal, voluntary instrument, notable voluntary guideline for ensuring sustainable small-scale fisheries in the context of food security and poverty alleviation, SFF guidelines, the right to food guidelines, tenor guidelines, etc.
The Secretary General of CAUPA, Dauda Sen, underscored the significance of the training in complementing IUU fishing. He said evidence suggested that maximum potential yield production by most of the fisheries resources are exhausted in the region. Thus, the need for collaboration in the effective management and conservation of these resources.
If effective governance arrangements are not put in place, the bounty that can be harvested from the sea will be placed at risk, with the consequences of declining food supply and income for fishers, fishmongers, processors, and traders.
In his keynote address, representative of the Ministry of Fisheries, Principal Fisheries Officer Mamadou Cham, advised participants to share experience, collaborate for the betterment of the sector. He noted some of the expected outcomes of the training.
Understand why it is necessary to manage fisheries resources, know the management tools and provisions at different levels, that is international and regional, understand co-management of fisheries resources.
The training will also look at FAO voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries. The fisheries sector contributes to affordable nutrition, employment, and foreign exchange earnings for countries across the world. These contributions are currently undermined by habitat destruction, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, and increased investment in fish meal and fish plants, as well as climate change. These underlying factors can be addressed through collaboration among stakeholders. Usman Mane, GRTS.
Time now for our first break. Sports news is up next. Do say. Welcome back. Now, joining forces to increase blood capacity, the Gambia Armed Forces and Bansang Hospital are using sports to encourage blood donation. The two institutions partnered in a major blood donation scheme conducted via a major football match staged to inspire a region-wide blood donation to boost the hospital's blood bank. Mudlamin Sane has the details of that report.
But vital kickoff taken by the regional governor
to officially set the ball rolling for a region-wide blood donation exercise through sports. This initiative is jointly organized by the 2nd Infantry Battalion of the Gambia Armed Forces and the Bansang Hospital to boast the hospital's blood bank.
The only reason you can help somebody with blood is by giving him your blood or looking for somebody to give him blood of the same groupings. So obviously, blood is the only thing we will not find in any supermarket, therefore it saves life. In other words, life is one of the most precious things, and I can discover or see that the armed forces is not only limited to lives and property, but they are going in to help hospitals to save more lives at any given time.
This is a usual endeavor for the Army, which is the single biggest blood donor institution in the Gambia. The joint partnership by the two institutions is a major quest to save lives through sports, initiating a football match to raise awareness on the significance of blood donation.
What will happen if anything happens to us in this region? Where do we go to? We all go to the Bansang Hospital. So we must equip this hospital with blood. So that anytime we come, we need blood, we have blood and save life. Our pregnant women, you know, it will be very disheartening. You see someone dying, bleeding to death, there's no blood at the bank. Suppose we just donated blood, you know, once 1 month ago, another thing happened, as it is always happening. Emergencies coming anytime. We need to have a blood bank.
From the football match that ended 3-1 in favor of the Bansang medical team, everyone here traveled back to the Kudang military post, where personnel of the Gambia Armed Forces donated massive pints of blood for the hospital bank.
People do call. You cannot imagine when pregnant women or old women who accompany these patients at the hospitals, you know, travel all the way to Bansang, to Kudang here, just to look for a blood. Look at the time spent, the duration of the time. Can that patient wait? So when I calculated all those times, I said, look, before we are told, let's get up and then do something so that we will know we will not have shortage of blood and we will continue to do it, inshallah.
This is the new approach taken by the armed forces in rural Gambia, with the Bansang Hospital moving to remedy blood shortage in the hospital. They are hoping to make this venture a big undertaking by including other government institutions within the region. Modula Minsane reporting for GRTS News from the Central River region.
Well, we're taking another quick break. International news comes up next. Do stay. Welcome back. We start the internationals in the Netherlands, where a newly discovered Vincent van Gogh drawing that has been hidden in a private collection for more than a century has gone on display for the first time at an Amsterdam museum. The drawing depicts a bald elderly laborer dressed in a waistcoat, trouser and boots, sitting on a wooden chair with his head in his hands. The UN mission in the Central African Republic says it will repatriate all Gabonese peacekeepers. This comes after the unit received 32 allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse. The claims were leveled against 81 members of the Gabon peacekeeping unit. 6 of the allegations were substantiated through an investigation.
By MINUSCA, the UN force in the country, already in June 2017, due to similar abuses, sexual abuses, another battalion of Congo-Brazzaville was recalled. It shows that there are persistent patterns in terms of behavior of the UN peacekeeping soldiers in this country. It undermines their reputation and the way they are viewed by the local population. It's, however, very important to signal that other elements played to the detriment of the image of the UN force MINUSCA in the country more substantially compared to the sexual abuses, although it's the kind of issue which has more traction in the Western audience. Locally, people complain much more about what they perceive as the non-effectiveness of the UN forces in the mandate to try to fight against the 14 armed groups in the country.
Well, speak to us, Hans, about why the persistence of these the sex scandals with UN forces, and what are the implications of this on the stability of the CAR?
I think the first implication is that it reduces the trust between the UN forces and the population. And if you are in a country where both the armed groups and the UN forces are trying to win the heart and mind of people, it's difficult to have effective counter-insurgency result if you are not in a good term or relationship with the local population, especially a part of this population which is women. And secondly, one should not overplay the role of this on the stability of the country. As I said, there are two audiences. At the international level, this is viewed very prominently, but locally, people are more interested on the non-effectiveness of the UN forces when it comes to fight against the armed groups. So the immediate.
Now, leaders of the Economic Community of West Africa have imposed stiffer sanctions on the military junta that ousted Guinea's President Alpha Condé. It includes the freezing of their financial assets and those of their families as well. The West African Regional Bloc also threatens to apply the same sanctions on Mali's military junta if they fail to hold elections earlier this next year. Ecowas hopes the sanctions can compel the juntas in Guinea and Mali to return to civilian rule. Nabil Ahmed Rufai has more.
This emergency summit became necessary after the military special forces in Guinea ousted President Alpha Condé, accusing him of corruption and mismanagement of the economy. The West African leaders have condemned the coup and demanded the immediate release of Condé, who's been detained by the military junta.
They imposed sanctions on the member of the National Committee for Development and Restoration in Guinea, the new organ that has taken over. The sanctions cover travel bans, freeze of assets, financial assets.
ECOWAS has called on more of the international community, including the African Union and European Union, to support the implementation of the sanctions. The West African leaders said they were also concerned over the slow pace of transition to civilian rule in Mali. They have threatened to impose sanctions, including the freezing of financial assets and travel bans on the people delaying the transition. Mali and Guinea were not present at this ECOWAS meeting. Both countries are still suspended from participating in any activity of the regional bloc. The West African leaders want Guinea to hold elections within the next 6 months and restore the country to constitutional rule. They have also urged Mali to present a roadmap for elections by October and conduct the polls in February next year, according to the transition plan. ECOWAS chairman is expected to visit Guinea and Mali to brief the military junta leaders on the decisions taken by the West African leaders. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra.
Well, that draws the curtains for this edition of GRTS News, but a quick recap of our top stories. His Excellency President Adama Barrow has pledged to electrify the entire Gambia in 2023 as he tours communities in his Meet the People tour. The Minister of Foreign Affairs has received a delegation from the African Union in the Gambia to review the country's economy and political process. Gambia is making global headlines after a new research about the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says the West African nation is the only country on track to meet the target of the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. And sports to support healthcare delivery. The Gambia Armed Forces and Bansang Hospital have staged a major regional football event to encourage blood donation. Away from home, a newly discovered Van Gogh drawing hidden in a private collection for more than a century is on display for the first time at an Amsterdam museum. Plus, leaders of the Economic Community of West Africa have imposed stiffer sanctions on the military junta that ousted Guinea's President Alpha Condé. Well, that does it for this edition of GRTS News. Thank you very much for watching. Please enjoy the rest of our programs. Bye for now.